Welcome to Bed Crime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T, and if true crime is your jam and like me, you enjoy delving into unsolved cases, trying to figure out who done it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you enjoy my videos, please hit that like button. 19-year-old Dylan Rounds has been missing now for 2 months, and his 20th birthday is coming up on August 1st. My brother was born that same day. Dylan's parents, Candic Cooley and Justin Rounds, are asking that people plant something in tribute to Dylan. His favorite flowers are sunflowers, but apparently those are out of season, so they're asking people to plant black-eyed Susans instead or any other plant of their choice. The family is even giving out seed packets at 2 locations in Idaho and via their Find Dylan Rounds official Facebook page. So if you want to get your hands on those seed packets, go to that Facebook page. What a beautiful way to honor this young man. During the past 2 months, 2 men whose names have come up in relation to Dylan have been arrested for unrelated charges and they're still in custody. Jim Brenner and Chase Venstra. Dylan knew Jim Brenner. As for Chase Venstra, Dylan may only have met him on the Wednesday before he vanished when he picked him up out in the Lucin desert. Dylan's mother and law enforcement believe Jim Brenner is involved in Dylan's disappearance. In fact, Brenner has been named a suspect in the case. Venstra has a long criminal history, and he's been named a person of interest. Jim Brenner occasionally worked for Dylan on his farm in Lucin, and he's Dylan's closest neighbor, living 5 miles away from Dylan's farm. The trailer in which Brenner was living is also about 100 yards from the grain shed where Dylan stored his seed truck when it rained, and about 100 yards from the spot where Dylan's boots were found. Brenner, a convicted felon, is known to be a hothead, a grump, and he's also been said to not be all that swift. Before he lived in Lucin, Jim Brenner got into 2 fistfights in Montello, neither of which he won. Brenner was given permission to live on the property where the grain shed is located in exchange for keeping an eye on things and acting as security. He wasn't paid. Funny that a violent criminal was hired to perform security, but I'm thinking the landowner probably did not do a background check on Brenner. As security out there, Brenner controlled a locked gate that Dylan needed to pass through to get to the grain shed. Although Dylan had permission from the landowner to store his seed truck in the shed when it rained, Jim Brenner is said to have been miffed about the arrangement. From what's been said, it seems that the locked gate led to a power struggle between the middle-aged Brenner and the young go-getter farmer, Dylan. Maybe Brenner resented having to get off his butt to open the gate when Dylan showed up. It's possible that part of Brenner's problem with Dylan goes back to when the 19-year-old hired him to drive his seed truck and make potato deliveries over a 2-month period. According to Kurt Wadsworth, Brenner was tasked with driving Dylan's seed truck and making 20 potato deliveries a day. For some reason, Brenner only managed to make 10 deliveries each day. When Brenner showed up for his final payment, he was allegedly mad to find the check less than the agreed-upon sum. Kurt Wadsworth felt that if Brenner wanted to make the full monies, he could have opted to work on the weekends to make up for the missed deliveries. This is hearsay, so don't ink that in a tattoo. As for serial lawbreaker and alleged thief extraordinaire, Chase Venstra, whose CV is all about robbing people, evading the cops, and once even having a 10-hour standoff with law enforcement, it's been said that he was given a ride out to Lucin on the Saturday when Dylan went missing. Another serial offender, an alleged all-around bad guy, named Robert Aviles, drove Venstra out there, allegedly. Chase Venstra being in Lucin on that particular Saturday seems awfully suspicious. There aren't any bars or cafes in Lucin, and Venstra doesn't own any land out there. So what was he doing in Lucin? If this story is true, it makes Dylan's disappearance seem like a planned event, as if Chase Venstra played a role in whatever befell the young farmer. But that's just me speculating. Dylan's plan on Friday, May 27th, was to plant all through the night. He knew from weather reports that it was going to rain on Saturday, and he wanted to get the seed in the ground before the storm hit. Apparently, it would have taken him 20 hours to plant all the seed. And Dylan stuck to the plan because the seed was planted. It appears he worked throughout the night to get the job done. At 6:51 a.m. on Saturday, he called his grandmother Karen Rounds, and he told her that he couldn't talk because he needed to drive the seed truck right then and there to the grain shed. Dylan promised to call Karen as soon as he finished that task. According to his mother, Candice, Dylan was somewhat frantic at that point because he didn't want the seed to get wet and rot. To me, this implies that Dylan still had ample seed in the seed truck. So after hanging up from his grandmother, Dylan likely exited his trailer to get into the seed truck and drive it the 5 miles to the shed. And part of that journey would have meant getting through the locked gate. Somewhere between that call and the grain shed, Dylan must have confronted evil because he never got a chance to call his grandmother back. His iPhone would later ping one last time at either 2:41 p.m. or 3:41 p.m. within a 15.4 mile radius of his farm. I say 2:41 or 3:41 because I've heard both times stated. That final ping indicates that either Dylan's phone was turned off or it was out of juice. I'm inclined to believe the former. So when Dylan failed to call Karen, she dialed up a man named Don Hatley and asked him to drive over to Dylan's farm and check on him. Hatley lives in the area about 6 miles away from Dylan's farm, and Hatley had been hired to work on both Dylan's grandfather's farm and Dylan's own farm. Hatley's also been referred to as a friend of the Rounds family. So Don agrees to do this welfare check, and he later tells Karen that he drove out there and all of Dylan's vehicles were there and basically everything looked fine except that Dylan wasn't there. He tells Karen something that reassures her, something akin to, "Don't worry, I'm sure everything's fine." Well, what that does is it keeps Karen from calling the police. Still not hearing from Dylan, Karen later calls Don Hatley a second time and asks him to do another wellness check. Don later tells her that he went out to Dylan's farm once again, but this time he went with Jim Brenner. There are rumors that a third person also went out there, but again, those are rumors and they're unfounded at this point. Once again, Hatley allegedly reassures Dylan's grandmother, telling her there's nothing to worry about. So once again, Karen ignores her intuition and doesn't alert the authorities. She doesn't call Dylan's parents either. So let's fast forward to Monday. That's when Dylan's mother gets a call from his best friend, JD. Somehow JD had found out that Dylan was missing. Perhaps Karen Rounds called him to see if he knew where Dylan was. JD asks Candice if she knows where her son is. And this is the first that Candice hears about Dylan being missing. Knowing her son and that he's never totally out of touch with family and friends, Candice immediately senses that something's off. She's said that Dylan is a creature of habit and that his farm comes before everything else. Candice knew that if Dylan wasn't there at his farm and if he hadn't spoken to any of his relatives or friends for a day and a half, that meant that he was either injured or something worse. Candice has said that at first she was thinking maybe Dylan got bit by a snake and he would just need medical attention. Her thoughts were that whatever was wrong could be fixed by a trip to the hospital. She and her husband immediately leave their home in Idaho and drive to Lucin. I believe Dylan's father, Justin Rounds, left that day for Lucin as well. By now, Dylan had been missing for most of Saturday, all of Sunday, and part of Monday. But when the family arrives at his farm, there are no tire tracks around Dylan's trailer or truck. Because of all the rain, there should have been deep tire marks from Don Hatley's vehicle. This indicates to the family that Hatley maybe never went out to Dylan's farm to check on him, as he'd told Karen. Hatley again lives 6 miles from Dylan's farm, so he would have driven there and not walked. Did Hatley blow off those searches? And if so, why? Also, why did he allegedly reassure Dylan's grandmother that nothing was wrong if he hadn't gone to the farm? Allegedly. When the family discovers that Dylan's trailer and his F-150 truck are locked and that the seat in the truck is set all the way forward, they realize that someone other than their son did that. Dylan, per Candice, once again is a creature of habit, and he always does the exact same thing. And one of those things is that he never locks anything, like never ever. Also, he was about 5 feet 11 inches from what I understand. The seat in the F-150 was always back to accommodate his height. Candice, who's 5 feet 11, would always have to move the seat forward to drive it. Also, the truck was in 4-wheel drive. Whoever put it in 4-wheel drive obviously didn't know that the 4-wheel drive was broken. Dylan would definitely not have done that. So at that point, the family is moving slightly beyond the Dylan's injured scenario to something maybe a little darker. After checking out the trailer and truck, the family heads over to the grain shed. There they do see deep ruts in the ground from the wheels of the seed truck, which is parked in the shed. A lady who lives in Salt Lake City and who often goes caving in the Lucin area provided Candice with a timeline of the rain over that weekend. She said it started raining on Saturday between 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning. But the rain that morning wasn't substantial, and it definitely wasn't a downpour. So after that rain that started around 5:30 and 6:30 a.m., it starts to get windy and the rain tapers off. It didn't start raining again until late Saturday afternoon, and this time it poured buckets. The rain continued throughout the night and all day Sunday. This told Candice that whoever parked the seed truck in that shed must have done it after the heavy rainfall. So that would mean it was parked sometime after the late Saturday afternoon or into Sunday. In Candice's mind, that means that Dylan likely wasn't the person who parked the seed truck. So the question becomes, if not Dylan, then who? And what happened to Dylan to prevent him from parking his seed truck? In my mind, this narrows the timeline in terms of the period during which Dylan ran into trouble. In my mind, this narrows the timeline in terms of the period during which Dylan ran into trouble. I personally believe something went down quickly after that 6:51 a.m. call to his grandmother, because my understanding is that Dylan was Karen right back after he drove the seed truck to the grain shed. Wouldn't he have dialed her up right after driving those 5 miles and getting that truck in the shed? Could he have called her as he walked back to his farm? Note that I've learned that there's a shortcut through the desert so that Dylan would not have had to walk the full 5 miles back to his farm. It was raining though, and maybe, just maybe, someone offered him a ride. Brenner, it's been said, has a crap vehicle that overheats when he drives it more than 20 minutes. Note that that story came from Kurt Wadsworth, so we can't know for sure that it's true. Was anyone else out there that morning to offer Dylan a ride? Maybe Venstra and Aviles? I'm just wondering. Note that Jim Brenner was the only person other than Dylan who knew how to start and drive the seed truck. Apparently those actions require some training. Driving a seed truck is a different beast from driving a car. So in my mind, it seems that if Dylan didn't park the seed truck, then it likely had to have been Jim Brenner. Allegedly. Let me throw that word in. Allegedly. But let's get back to the Monday when Dylan's family is looking for him. About an hour and a half into the search, Dylan's boots are found behind a pile of dirt off the side of the road, about 100 yards away from the grain shed and Jim Brenner's trailer. One boot is marred by a small stain, which is later determined to be blood. Whose blood it is, we don't yet know, but maybe the cops do. Dylan's parents were already sinking from seeing Dylan's locked truck and trailer. Finding his boots pushed them over the edge. They knew that if those boots weren't on Dylan's feet, then Dylan was in trouble, or he was beyond trouble. Now, please don't come for me for saying that. Dylan's mother has expressed that very same sentiment. Brenner, by virtue of living where the boots were found, is eventually questioned by law enforcement. They don't take him into custody, though. After that first interview, he asks his buddy, Don Hatley, to safeguard some firearms for him. As a convicted felon, Brenner can't legally possess firearms. Hatley agrees to safeguard the weapons. Note that Don Hatley did not go to law enforcement to tell them about Brenner's guns. Only after being interviewed by law enforcement himself does Don Hatley fess up to storing firearms for Brenner. You'd think Don Hatley would have spilled the beans about these firearms to law enforcement right from the start, being that he's supposedly friends with Larry and Karen Rounds. Wouldn't you think he would have had the Rounds' backs and would have been watching out for their grandson? Don Hatley's behavior, his willingness to store Brenner's guns, and his lack of telling the police about them may be because 3 to 4 weeks before Dylan vanished, Hatley suddenly stopped working for Dylan. It's been said that Dylan didn't like Hatley, and some have said that Dylan fired him. Others, namely Kurt Wadsworth, said that Don Hatley chose to stop working for Dylan by his own accord because he'd received a check for $20,000 and he said he just wanted to go and fish and he didn't feel like working. At this point, we web sleuths can't know for certain which explanation is true. In my mind, it's more likely that Dylan booted Hatley to the curb. Is it possible that Brenner and Hatley, and maybe that third unnamed person, are behind Dylan's disappearance? Brenner and Hatley both had issues with Dylan, and he had issues with both of them. Could the third person be Chase Venstra? He was allegedly in Lucin at some point on Saturday. I'm not sure exactly when he turned up there. When Dylan's parents arrived in Lucin, they were told that Dylan had closed and locked the gate to the grain shed for the very first time on that Saturday. I'm assuming Jim Brenner probably told them that, or it could have been Don Hatley, maybe. Apparently before that, Dylan had never closed the gate, according to whoever said this. Could that be the reason Brenner resented Dylan using the grain shed? That maybe Dylan always left the gate open? Someone also told Dylan's parents that after Dylan closed the gate, he would have had to drive in the direction toward Montello. From that, Dylan's parents gleaned that these men, possibly Brenner and Hatley, they didn't say who told them that, were trying to direct them away from the grain shed and Lucin and instead toward Montello. The guys from HeavyDSparks said something about a theory that maybe Brenner and Hatley thought that if Dylan disappeared, they would be perhaps hired by Dylan's grandfather, Larry, to run the farm, that they would earn money working for Dylan's farm, and that could be motive for getting rid of young Dylan. Or maybe they thought they could buy the farm from Larry Rounds. I believe all the acreage out there cost about $15,000. The more I learn about Dylan's disappearance, the more I feel it was driven by a toxic blend of greed, resentment, jealousy, and hate. In Candic Cooley's latest interview with Nate Eaton of East Idaho News, she said that she and Dylan's father have been told of some evidence that has provided them with some answers. I'm wondering what those answers are. Did they receive results from that small drop of blood on one of Dylan's boots? Or is the rumor that Robert Aviles led the authorities to Dylan's iPhone, is that true? And did they learn something from whatever was on that phone? He left him a message, and the landowner hasn't been able to get into the message. But this story comes from Kurt Wadsworth, so we can't be sure that it's true. It's simply hearsay. But if there is a message on that phone, and the FBI has the phone, you can bet that they've been able to get into it to get the message. When YouTuber HeavyDSparks and his pals went out to search for Dylan in a helicopter, they spoke to Candic Cooley and her husband. In their video about the search, they stated that the ground where Dylan's boots were found indicated that a struggle had taken place there. Is that where Dylan was confronted? We can't depend on that, though, because it's possible the boots were planted there by the perpetrator or perpetrators, if there's more than one, to throw law enforcement off, and the marks in the ground showing a struggle could have been created as well to try and create a false narrative. I say that because if Jim Brenner is really involved, why would he leave evidence so close to his trailer? That just doesn't make sense to me. But then again, some people have said that Brenner lacked smarts. HeavyDSparks and his friends were either told or they surmised that the family felt that Dylan was likely buried somewhere in the desert and that whoever did it used a backhoe. Kurt Wadsworth's backhoe was sitting in Lucin on the day Dylan vanished. Kurt has said that it was there because he still has work to do out in Lucin. Could Wadsworth's backhoe have been used for the gruesome act of burying a body? If so, would that require a key that only Wadsworth had, or did he, like Dylan, leave the key in the ignition? Remember, we've been told that Dylan always left the key to the seed truck in the ignition. I've reached out to YouTuber Salty Pancakes. He's been doing a lot of interviews with Kurt Wadsworth, and I'd love it if he would ask Kurt about that issue. Did he leave the key in the ignition? I'll let you know if Salty Pancakes responds. Of course, we don't know for certain that Dylan was harmed and buried out in Lucin. The evidence certainly points to something really bad happening to him out there, but it's possible that Dylan could have also been driven away from Lucin too. One of the problems about searching in the desert is that when the wind blows, the dust scatters. An area that was disturbed could quickly be masked if a dust storm blows through or if the rain pounds the land. But I guess those elements could also uncover a body. But I seem to remember someone related to this case, maybe Kurt Wadsworth, but I'm not sure, saying that Brenner once stated that he wanted to harm Dylan and bury him in the wash in the desert. Now, I might be dreaming that up, but I could swear I heard that. If any of you heard that as well, Please let me know in the comments and tell me who said it if you remember. Now, in case you're upset with me for going to the worst case scenario about Dylan's fate, please take a listen to what his mother told Nate Eaton of East Idaho News in an interview last week.
What needs to be done is getting done. We pretty much all knew from the first day we went out there, and I know people think that's horrible to say, and nobody wanted to believe it, especially us. You know, Justin and I, we didn't want to believe it, but we both know our son, and we know nothing would take him away from his farm. Absolutely nothing. Not even for a day. He had to get the rest of that seed in the ground. Nothing would have taken him away from them. So it was just one of those gut feelings where you don't want it to be true. It's your parents' worst nightmare. But when you have a kid like Dylan and his patterns and his drive and his passion has been there, since he was a little kid, and that's his baby, we knew he wouldn't leave. There's no way. Not just not leave, but leave without his pickup. Leave without his boots. All the stuff was right in front of us from day one.
I don't know about you, but what I'm hearing here is Candice saying that she and Justin Rounds were fairly certain from the moment they saw his boots and his beloved F-150 truck parked and locked that Dylan had been done in by someone. Like you, I want Dylan to be found alive, but what I'm hearing in Candice's words is that she's pretty much sure that that's not the case. I don't think that's because she doesn't care about her son. I think it's because she knows him, she knows his habits, and he would have had those boots on that Saturday morning. And if they're off his feet with blood on them in the desert, then Dylan's maybe no longer breathing. So I do not believe that Candic Cooley and Justin Rounds are currently looking for places where Dylan may be being held hostage. I think they believe in their hearts that their son met with foul play, and now they just want to find him, find out what happened, and find the monsters responsible for it. And I also feel that Kurt Wadsworth's story from the psychic, when all was said and done, made Candice, at least, feel that Wadsworth was trying to push her and Justin in the wrong direction, send them out on a wild goose chase, maybe away from where Dylan really is. That's just me repeating what Candice has said about some people who turned up in Lucin when the family was searching and when the police showed up, and who pointed them, at least in her mind, in the wrong direction. I'm not saying Kurt Wadsworth has anything to do with Dylan's disappearance. At one point after hearing him talk about Dylan, I was pretty sure he had nothing to do with this. I'm trying to pull myself back now and trying to stay neutral and follow the facts and listen to Dylan's parents, his mother. This is simply a heartbreaking story. And when I look at pictures of Dylan, I start crying at this point. Let's say a prayer for Dylan's loved ones, his parents, his grandparents, his siblings, his friends. They must be going through hell. The family wanted to help Dylan realize his dream of running a big farm. That's why they helped him purchase all that land out in Lucin. It's possible they're blaming themselves for Dylan being in Lucin. Karen Rounds may be particularly devastated because she listened to Don Hatley and didn't raise the alarm bell, even when her gut told her otherwise. I'm not running with any theories about Dylan's parents wanting to harm their son right now, because there's zero evidence of that. All I've seen of Candice is a fierce mama bear advocating for her son, which is what we've all been wanting to see from Summer Wells' mother and father. Dylan's family has gone to the moon and back to look for him. Summer's family never even walked much beyond their driveway to look for her. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now please, if you see value in my content and you enjoy my videos, please hit that like button. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do so. And if you want to leave me a comment, I promise I will read it.